Let's turn now to Democratic U.S. Congressman Anthony Brown in Washington. He is vice chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and is a retired colonel in the U.S. Army Reserve, having served more than a quarter of a century in the U.S. military, including Iraq. Congressman, thank you very much for joining us here on the show. Congress, if I may, I would like to start off by showing viewers and show yourself, of course, I'm sure you've seen this video of U.S. troops leaving Syria today, being pelted by rotten vegetables. Kurds clearly very angry and disappointed, feeling very betrayed. What is your take from this?
Yeah, this is a very unfortunate situation that's taken place in Syria. And what this demonstrates, as you say, is that Kurds feel betrayed. But they don't feel betrayed by the U.S. service members, the soldiers who fought by their side. They're betrayed by a president who, as early as December of last year, is essentially when he green-lighted Turkey's process and then the ultimately decision to invade Syria. When President Trump announced he was going to withdraw 2,000 U.S. service members from Syria. It demonstrated a lack of resolve in fighting ISIS. It represented an abandonment of this partnership that we had with the Kurdish forces in defeating ISIS, where they lost thousands of soldiers, many civilian lives, and we walked away. And because President Trump is both ignorant of and indifferent to the decisions that he makes in Syria.
A lack of resolve, you're saying, and abandonment. You served in the U.S. military, including Iraq, as we mentioned. What does President Trump's decision to abandon the Kurds do to, you think, to U.S. influence in the region? Do you worry it will no longer be trusted, Congressman, by its allies?
Absolutely. One of the lessons that we learned in Iraq is that we can achieve many of our strategic goals if we work with our partners on the ground, indigenous forces, if you will, providing them intelligence and special forces and some air cover and not having to commit large conventional forces. But that only works when there's trust and credibility between the United States and its partners. So not only have we lost that now with our Kurdish partners, but what does that mean for partners that we may look to in the future in other places around the world? So U.S. credibility is waning at this time, all because President Trump believes that this is, quote unquote, not our problem. And I think he's wrong. What happens in Syria, certainly with the potential reemergence of ISIS, is definitely could be a problem for the United States.
But he did promise, Congressman, to bring troops back home. And many would argue he's keeping that promise, although we did see some troops not leaving the country, but going over to Iraq. So how do you explain that to viewers in the United States, to his supporters who say all we want are our husbands, our sons, our wives, or our daughters back?
That's right. And, you know, listen, Americans are weary. They've grown tired of 18 years in a counterterrorism fight in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Syria, and quite frankly, other places around the world. But as it has been said, if you don't want endless wars, you've got to win the war. Now, how you define winning, of course, is difficult. It may be military victory, diplomatic victory, but you've got to set the conditions where we can assure or optimize U.S. national security. Withdrawing 2,000 troops makes it more dangerous for the United States and not less dangerous for the United States. A smaller U.S. footprint supporting Kurdish forces on the ground, I believe, would be an acceptable state of affairs or condition for the American public.
Congressman, I'm going to pivot, if I may, to U.S. politics. We heard President Trump today said this about the Democrats. Take a listen.
I think the Democrats fight dirty. I think they're lousy politicians. But two things they have. They're vicious and they stick together. They don't have Mitt Romney in their midst. They don't have people like that. They stick together. You never see them break off. The Republicans have to get tougher and fight. We have some that are great fighters, but they have to get tougher and fight because the Democrats are trying to hurt the Republican Party for the election, which is coming up.
So, Congressman, he's really making the point that Republicans are not doing enough to support him. From what you hear from him, what we've heard in the last 24 to 48 hours, do you think this is there's a crack emerging or some sort of fissure, or that he's losing confidence with some Republicans? What's your take on this?
Look, my take is, and I'm also critical of Republicans, and my criticism is that not enough of them have stepped up and called the president out for who he is and what he's doing. Betraying our partners in Syria, holding up U.S. aid to a partner nation like Ukraine, who is invaded by Russia, which is one of the chief foes of the United States. He's holding up that aid, or at least he did, to advance his political agenda. He wants to profit in office through self-dealing by steering contracts to his resort in Doral in Miami, Florida. And although he did backpedal from that, it definitely demonstrates his state of mind and his relationship to the office of president and how it benefits him personally and financially. So my disappointment is that not enough Republicans have stepped up to call the president out on these misdeeds, misdealings, and self-dealing.
What would be the red line? At what point would they turn around and say, actually, we don't have your back? Because so far, they've only attacked him, really, when it comes to G7, the property, as Doral, and really when it comes to foreign policy, when it comes to Syria.
Right. I think, though, on the House Intelligence Committee right now is investigating the president's abuse of power when he undermined U.S. national security by inviting Ukraine to not meddle in our elections, but to dig up dirt on an opponent. And that's pretty easy to understand. It's easy for the American people to understand. It's easy for Republicans to understand. As we proceed with this investigation and we uncover more information that fills in the blanks, because the outline's already there. It's in the transcript summary of the call between President Trump and President Zelensky, dated July 25th. When we fill in those blanks, I think Republicans will see we've got a real problem on our hands, and that problem is President Trump.
And really making it easier to understand is the difference between this investigation and other hearings we've heard and other investigations. Congressman Anthony Brown, always great to have you on the show. Come back anytime. Always welcome.
Thank you.